It was past midnight, and the rain was relentless, cold needles falling from a dark, endless sky. The streets glistened under the yellow streetlights, empty except for a small figure stumbling through the downpour. She had no umbrella, no coat, just a thin, soaked dress clinging to her shivering frame. Officer Daniel Harris noticed her from his patrol car. At first, he thought she might be intoxicated or lost. She kept glancing over her shoulder, clutching a worn canvas bag tightly to her chest as if guarding something precious. Her pace was uneven, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, as if she couldn't decide whether to flee or collapse. Daniel's instincts told him something wasn't right. He turned on his low beams and followed at a careful distance, not wanting to scare her away. The rain tapped heavily against the windshield, blurring his view, but he could see her shoulders trembling, not from the cold alone. She kept wiping her face, and Daniel wasn't sure if it was rain or tears. Finally, she turned into a narrow alley, almost slipping on the wet pavement. Daniel parked at the entrance and stepped out, rain soaking through his uniform instantly. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice steady but kind. She froze but didn't turn around. "I'm not in trouble," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. Daniel took a few steps closer. "I'm not here to arrest you. I just want to make sure you're safe." She hesitated, then slowly turned. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen. She looked far too young to be out here alone, maybe early 20s. The bag in her arms seemed to weigh more than she could carry. "What's in the bag?" Daniel asked gently. Her voice cracked. "My baby." Daniel's heart sank. He stepped forward quickly but softly, his training kicking in. "Can I see?" She hesitated again, then loosened her grip. Inside was a tiny infant wrapped in an old blanket, the child's face flushed but calm, unaware of the storm. Daniel guided her under a small awning to shield them from the rain. "You need to tell me what happened," he said, keeping his tone gentle. She took a deep breath, tears mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. "I left him. His father. He's not safe. Not for me, not for my baby. I didn't have time to pack. I just ran." The words poured out between sobs, how she had endured months of fear, how every day she had promised herself she'd leave, and how tonight, after one look at her sleeping child, she'd decided to finally go. She had nowhere to stay, no money, no plan, only the desperate hope of finding safety. Daniel knew the shelters were full, but he also knew a woman named Grace who ran a small, discreet safe house for women in crisis. He called her immediately, his voice firm with urgency. Grace didn't hesitate, she told him to bring the young mother right away. Back in the patrol car, the heater on full blast, the baby stirred and let out a soft cry. The woman soothed him, humming a lullaby that was more trembling breath than melody. Daniel drove slowly, the wipers struggling against the heavy rain. When they arrived, Grace opened the door herself. She took one look at the soaked woman and the sleeping baby and stepped aside. Inside, the air was warm and smelled faintly of tea. Grace wrapped them both in dry blankets and promised they could stay as long as they needed. For the first time that night, the young mother smiled, a small, fragile smile, but real. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking again, but this time from relief. Daniel left quietly, standing in the rain for a moment before getting back into his car. He thought about how easy it would have been to ignore her, to drive past without looking twice. But he knew that sometimes, the smallest choice, to stop, to ask, to care, could change the entire course of someone's life. Weeks later, Daniel received a letter at the station. It was from her. She wrote about how her baby was healthy, how she had found a part-time job, and how she was finally starting to believe in a future without fear. At the bottom, in uneven handwriting, were 3 words that hit him harder than anything in his career: "You saved us." The rain had stopped that night, but the memory of it never left him. Because behind every stranger in the dark, there might be a story that needs someone to stop and listen. And sometimes, that's all it takes to bring someone home.